let's take you now. And I don't even know where to say we're going. Are we going to the Eastern Townships? Are we going to l'Estrie? Are we going to the Canton de l'Est? I don't even know. What's in a name? Quite a lot. Since adding 2 municipalities to the region, consultations are being done to figure out if people prefer Canton de l'Est, the Eastern Townships, or l'Estrie. Let's go to Jody Robinson on this one, an archivist with the Eastern Townships Resource Centre in Sherbrooke. Jody, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Can we talk about, maybe to start off here, before we make the definitive proclamation on what the name should be, let's take a look. Maybe let's take a look at the history of both of the names, right? So maybe we should start off with l'Estrie, because I know it does sometimes cause confusion if you're talking to friends and you say Estrie, and they don't know what you're talking about, and then it's Eastern Townships. So let's start off with that. Well, what's the history behind l'Estrie?
Well, Estrie, it essentially is derived partially from the original name for the area, that is the Estrie / Canton de l'Est. And it actually, it was officialized in 1981. That became the official term for the region that is along that southern part of the province. By the border, and it was actually the name was first coined in the 1940s by Monsignor Morris O'Brady, and so he was taking the Canton de l'Est, so he took S, east, out of that, and then he added Tri, which has some romantic languages allusions, but as well it has a reference to the word Tri can sort of mean a rich and fertile land, which of course, there's a lot of farming in the townships, and it was, originally settled as that nature in many of the places. So it had a relevance there. And so then putting Est and Tri together, you have Estrie. And so, and then that was, as I said, coined around the 1940s. And became officialized in 1981. And then since then, on all the signs and maps, it was Estrie and not Canton de l'Est anymore.
It's so interesting, because when I think of a name that I would classify as romantic and charming, boy, I'd put Eastern Townships right up there, right? Canton de l'Est, it just sounds like a lovely place I want to go. Mm-hmm. I know tourism and branding is a big part of this decision as well, but let's get into Eastern Townships, right? And that name, where that came from. Yeah,
so the Eastern Townships has its origins way back as early as the 1790s. And so at this point in time, if we're, going back in the past, following the Civil War in the United States in particular, there were a lot of immigrants who were settlers who were coming up into Canada for various reasons, some of them loyalists, but some of them just looking for new land. And so they had been in the area from, the end of the war, 1783, and had been wanting to be able to settle officially, because these lands were here, but originally they were considered wastelands, which is kind of a weird way to think of an area geography, exactly. And so they weren't available for settlers to be able to own them. And they petitioned the government at the time, and finally in 1792, with a proclamation of Lord Clark, he designated these areas in lower Canada at the time as available for settlement. And they divided the land according to the English system, which was townships, rather than the seigneuries of the French system. And so that's how we get these townships. And at this time, you have these townships in Lower Canada, and you have townships as well that were opened up for settlement in Ontario, Upper Canada. And so that's how we get the Eastern Townships, as it would eventually become to be known. As early as into the early 1800s, you start to see Eastern Townships on the maps, and then the ones in Upper Canada were the Western Townships. And that's kind of the idea of how we have, or the general agreement of how we came to have Eastern and Western Townships. So Western in Ontario and Eastern in Quebec.
We are with Jody Robinson, an archivist with the Eastern Townships Resource Centre in Sherbrooke. What's in a name? We're talking about the name of the Eastern Townships, or Estrie, depending on how you refer to it. So, Jody, let me ask you, what does your heart say on this issue? And what does your brain say on this issue?
Well, I mean, I think, well, because I think actually if you ask my brain, because of course, like if we're thinking about the Estrie versus the Eastern Townships, which would eventually become the Canton l'Est by the 1850s, it's often known as its French translation. The geography of the two places is so different. So the Estrie is only about 2/3 the size of what was originally more often designated as the Eastern Townships. So I feel like going back to that original, a lot of the original boundaries, it makes more sense. If I'm talking from a brain perspective, you see a lot of in the Estrie, the integration of our health services from the parts that are now Montérégie, but which were originally Canton l'Est, as well as like other areas. So that kind of makes sense to me. There's also other parts of the government administration that are being integrated into the Estrie, even though technically they're part of other administrative regions. So I think like redefining the boundaries of the map. I mean, at that point, I guess there's a question of whether those new boundaries are Estrie or Canton l'Est. But I think, tourism already uses Canton l'Est as an advertisement, like to promote the region. And for me, and just, from a heart level, because we're talking about lines on a map in some degrees, but for me, Canton l'Est is the topography. It's the mountains. It's the rolling hills. It's all of the geography that like is intrinsically ingrained in my soul.
Is it the dairy? Is it the dairy farm in Lennoxville as well? Because you grew up on a dairy farm.
Yes, yeah. I mean, from my parents' farm, I could see the Megantic Mountains because it's quite high. Just even driving the 410 because I'm in Sherbrooke, and you can come up over one of the hills and you can see Orford and other mountains, and all of that is the Canton l'Est. It's the Eastern Townships to me. It's not the Estrie, but that's just kind of like a heart and soul thing.
Jody, when is the decision going to be made on this? What's happening on this front?
That, I mean, I'm probably not as up on this as I should, but I know that there are consultations happening. There's one coming up quite soon, I believe, online, and which is going to be a remote, like a virtual consultation. And then I think they're helping to do a tour of actual in-person consultations to kind of get a pulse of the communities on where they stand. But you'd have to kind of Google the actual dates since I don't remember what they are offhand.
I pulled it up here, Jody. Okay,
Great.
So the virtual consultation just happened, but in-person consultations, March 14th, Sherbrooke, March 17th, Lac-Mégantic, March 22nd, Granby. Okay? So there you go.
Perfect.
Jody, hey, great talking to you. I love talking about, with the mind and the heart, sometimes they differ. It's fun stuff. And, of course, a part of Quebec that a lot of our listeners care deeply, deeply about. Thanks so much.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for having me. Have a great day.
That is Jody Robinson, archivist with the Eastern Townships Resource Centre in Sherbrooke.